How much baking soda should I use as a substitute for baking powder in my cake recipe?
Hello, bakers. Today, we'll be talking about an essential element of baking, leavening agents. More specifically, we'll tackle how much baking soda you should use as a substitute for baking powder in your cake recipe. This can be a bit tricky, but no worries, we'll guide you through it.
What's the difference between baking powder and baking soda?
First things first, it's important to understand that baking powder and baking soda aren't interchangeable. They might both be leavening agents, but they work differently. Baking soda is pure sodium bicarbonate, and it reacts with acid in your recipe to produce carbon dioxide, which helps the dough rise. On the other hand, baking powder contains sodium bicarbonate, along with an acid. It can stand alone in a recipe and doesn't need an additional acidic ingredient to work.
How can I substitute baking soda for baking powder?
When you're out of baking powder, you can substitute it with baking soda, but there's a catch. You'll need to use less baking soda and add an acid to the recipe. Here's the basic rule. For every teaspoon of baking powder, you should substitute with a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. But remember, since baking soda doesn't contain an acid, you'll need to add one. This can be cream of tartar, buttermilk, yogurt, or lemon juice. Generally, you'll want to use about a half teaspoon of acid for every quarter teaspoon of baking soda.
Are there any drawbacks?
Now, while this conversion can be a lifesaver, there can be some drawbacks. The added acid might change the taste of your recipe, and if the balance isn't quite right, your cake might not rise as expected. Also, baking soda can add a soapy taste if used in large amounts, so be careful. There you have it. Baking is truly a science, but with these tips, you'll be prepared the next time you find yourself without baking powder. Remember to measure carefully, and keep in mind the different effects these two leavening agents can have on your recipe. Happy baking!